All right, welcome to it's a just a bit of a it's kind of a recap lecture. Just quickly going back, I want to move back for the moment to have a short focus and like I say, revisit interviewing and interviewing techniques, which is way back in lesson 32 and 33. This is particularly why I'm doing this to make sure that we just have covered what we have covered in class as well, but across the boards, obviously part-timers and full-timers as well, making sure that you're ready for that aspect of your F2. Okay, so that is why we're having this particular revision lecture. Why am I also doing it? Well, so that you have on record somewhere that you can watch over and over again, should you want to be prepared for. And what I'm going to do while you're preparing for your F2, and was just going to have a look at these particular, so being obviously been building this particular snap content. I think I'm going to change this now. H radio, right? So H radio, just in general, because I did with the 3 2 3s and the 2 2 3s, right? Snap content exercise. Might as well make that change right now. And I'm going to go through. So with the 3 2 3s full timers, we have gone through and fully worked out these particular interview questions, right? Okay, for the five that were suggested, I have shared with you part of the document. So when I say part of the document, certain aspects of the document were completed, and this is I genuinely only did that so that you have a working example of something, right, that you can approach. Right. Okay. Anyway, so let's quickly go back to the lesson. Like I said, I'm going to go through this um, and focus specifically on some of the key aspects of interviewing. Right. So let's just quickly give it a bit of a introduction. Every station should have an interview policy or guide in place. Now, the purpose for this is for us to understand there's decorum, right, within the station itself as to how it is that we exact interviews when we go on air, right? So an interview should be considered a feature and should have all the characteristics of a feature, beginning, middle, and an end. In other words, we want to make sure that this is a holistic approach to what we are. We are going to put out on air. We have the specific person on air for a specific reason. And I think, as I said, I don't want to mention what I've mentioned before too much, but remember that a certain guest can be in studio for many different angles, right? Many different reasons. And if you want an example, I think I've used one before, but a politician in particular would be there for many different reasons, right? So we don't want to talk about or talk to someone about everything and anything, just like we won't do that in I'm saying content wise, in specific, we'd have an angle and we'd approach that based on the relevance of that day, the relevance of the station. I mean, the target audience, the station, obviously within the lifestyle of the target audience, and so on, right? Okay, so we again, that's a bit of a target market run through that we have looked at before. Just a bit of an old school there with the LSM, and we now have changed that over to the SEM, right? So we again, how can I say, we move our focus over, right? We shift our focus over to that particular composite listener, right? So who is that listener? What are they about? What are they interested in? What is important to their lives, right? And at the current particular moment, for example, this hypothetical composite listener is well, it's Joe. I think it's Joe is a young South African girl or guy. Not too sure. Haven't I'm glazing over it here. You know, Joe, girl, guy, doesn't matter. Right. What's important is relationship, sex, friends, family, school, work, and ultimately play is important to this particular composite. And so we know that obviously we'd like to center our content, including in this case our interviews, based on the composite listener's life, right? We'd always, just kind of again look back at why we conduct the research, and this is what we're aiming for to get that very exact not hypothetical, our normal lives, so within our station, to want to be able to focus on who it is exactly that our target listener is, so we can speak to them in a manner that they would like to be spoken to, and also speak to them about things that they want to hear. Again, I don't want to go over stuff that I have done before, and so I'm going to kind of skip over this and focus on this six-phase approach to interviewing prep, right, or interview prep. So here we go. The magic comes from phase 1 to 4. And if you get these foundation phases right, phase 5 and 6 will follow thereafter. So let's go through those phases once again. Phase 1, the quality test. Be selective of the guests that the show obviously books in order to get the best results. Remember, with content in general, right, you want your number one concept, your number one angle, in this case, your number one choice in guest for whatever reason you are creating an interview or creating a space or time within your show for an interview to take place. So we have obviously the variation of many different types of interviews. On the surface level, we can look at, for example, like expert professionals, doctors, lawyers, landscapers, or whatever, architects, who knows, right? There are many expert professionals that are out there, but we could also then have politicians in there. We could have expert professionals based on experience. So, for example, someone was the victim of a crime, for example, let's say a robbery or unfortunately, like a rape or whatever it may be, some kind of a sexual abuse or abuse, like domestic abuse. We'd find that this person would be the expert professional in that particular experience. And so we would want to bring them over in, right? It is not recommended. It's almost on the borderline of mandatory to always go for the first best choice, right, for an interview, because second best is just not good enough. And you can alternatively, right, either throw out the interview, should you have to cover that particular context or content, right, you would have to then find a way of making revolving it around, that guess that you couldn't get immediately, the first best choice, and with a second best choice that almost makes sense. So, for example, a politician that has to, or just had made a statement this morning, right? You want to get them on air to talk more about that, but they might not be available because maybe it's just like half an hour later, 2 hours later, and so they are unavailable. But you could get the press secretary, right, or you could get a political analyst, right, who would then speak of, and you would play parts of that address, that national address, or whatever it may have been, just to make sure that we are covering the core aspect and making sure that what we're doing is we're adding value and adding layers to our approach again to our content piece, right? So, but once again, let's ask ourselves 4 questions. Are they a big star with a company like Universal Studios here, obviously with for example, a local production company or high target appeal, and they can tell great stories, right? Does one of the show players have an high interest in the guests? And this will create great entertainment. So, for example, one of you on the team might have a vested interest in whoever it is that you are hosting as a guest. Not, you remember, don't do the show for you, do the show for the listeners. And if you find that that's synchronized with this here over here, then go ahead and hold that into or run that interview, right? Are they a great interview? Which is a really big question, which is even if the name's not a huge name, they have to be able to like really tell us a great story, propagate a great story, great conversation, be a somewhat great speakers, right? And again, be someone that will not just give us like yes or no or answers or close-ended answers, saying no comment, there's no comment. That would like to obviously have them quality assured before that. I'll show you in a moment how. Will they set up one of the players on the show in some way? Yeah, maybe. Again, it's a quality test. I would find more so that the real quality lies over here and lies over there, the relevance of, right? Okay. the pre-production. This is very important, right? This pre-production of being able to prep for this person, understand a bit more about the context, read biographies, go and check out the social media, go check out the news that obviously revolves around why you are bringing them in studio, you're chatting to them, right? And then you develop first set of questions, right? So you are developing an arc. Remember, they're coming in here because they want to be able to speak about something in specific, or you would like them to speak about something in specific. So it could be a fun element or a serious element. We don't know until we decide why the guest is going to be on the air, right? So the time wise, like 60 minutes, right? Is I mean, that's not a what is it, like a hard and fast rule. Prepare as for as long as you need the preparation for. And this is important because you cannot hold this pre-interview with this person to waste their time if you haven't researched enough around them to be able to hold this pre-interview process. This is, for me, maybe the most important out of all the phases, because here's where you actually decide where you stand with this particular interviewee, right? And obviously you gauge as to their potential and their ability to communicate a story. Do they have the information that you want? Can they respond to the angles that you ask them? The pre-interview for me can be sometimes 10 minutes, right? And we do it telephonically. We don't want to waste each other's time by holding it on Zoom or holding it even on a video call. It doesn't matter, right? Just set a time apart, and not before, not this way before your show, right? Because in case, here's the thing, let's say in case this person is a bit of a dud. In other words, you chat to them, they're being a little bit like passive aggressive, they're not really a great communicator. They might be a professor in this, but they don't know how to actually communicate well. This is going to put your quality, obviously the brand's quality or your on-air quality at risk. And so you have to decide to go with someone else, right? And you explain to them, listen, like I just be straightforward with him. Look, I had the interview. I just have to think about it. So we'll get back to you by the end of the day or within the next hour or so about moving forward, right? If you feel like maybe there's something you can extract from them and you don't have to actually hold a full interview, then pre-record the interview, right? And actually cut only the important parts like statements or like allegations or whatever it is, right? Like statements of fact, should I say, so factual statements, standpoints that are important that you have to hear from the horse's mouth, but you don't need more than that. So you can kind of like again, just kind of precursor that and risk management, right? So again, this is very important, super important. Like I say, some of mine are 10 minutes, for example. Normally with musicians, if I don't know them, I'm going to speak to them for the first time. I'm going to chat to them before and definitely to see if we can build a bit of a rapport, to show them obviously I'm invested, to show them and also make like have them note that there can't be, for example, free advertising of X, Y, and Z, their concerts, their whatever it may be, their live events or products that they're selling. Sorry, man. Right, should drink some water, right? I almost feel like I'm rushing through this, right? But so we have to talk about that so that they don't go on air and we get in trouble. And they do that. There's a lot of artists that previous, I think in the maybe in a before era, like a past era, would really come on and they would blindside you. They would have this. They would say one thing, or the agent would say something, you would agree to it, and they come on, they bulldoze your show. And you know what? Remember, you're in control of that mic, okay? So you can just tell them, listen here, like, thank you so much. It's ended because the things we've said to you before, and do not do this. You cannot use our platform without paying for it because that's how advertising actually works. Does that mean we don't promote their services, their social media pages and stuff? No, we can do that at the end of the whole interview. It's one little point there. It doesn't take long, 15 to 20, 30 seconds or so. Not a big deal. And that's fine. We can do that, right? Okay. It is also up to us to make sure that we do stay away from like promoting only the product or the service or the concert or whatever it is, and look more around like speaking to that artist about their own process or about their experiences or about their opinions, right? Okay. So then check. See, ask the phase two questions here. So this is when you run through some of the base questions, 5 questions, like you'll see that we have over here, right? Okay, that I've planned out over here with or prepped out, should I say, over here with the 30 years, right? Okay. Anyway, and you run through and see whether or not they can actually answer or are willing to answer those questions. Very important, right? Phase two, develop a game plan. So after you've done this, you have to go back and restructure the questions, right? Restructure your approach, your angle, and make sure that you get what you want out of it for the listener because they are waiting for that when you go on in and say, oh, I've got this particular guest on, they're going to be chatting to us about that. Make sure that what you promise them is what you deliver, right? So make sure that also that you understand the pre-interview allows you a lot of context, right? That you need to note. You must note this down because that's how we keep conversation going, as opposed to a question one, question two, question three, question four, question five, and there's really no life or dimension in that. Conversations allow us to be able to do follow-up questions, insights allowed for that as well. We'll be able to contextualize a particular, let's say a particular what would say like an arc of that particular conversation too. It's great, right? We are in control. That is the main thing. Do not let the if you lose control to the guest, that's actually your problem and your fault, right? So you need to make sure that you are in control of your own show, the guest, and every element that does come in there. Make sure that you also spice up things. So make sure you go and get some sound bites to be able to put in there, or some listener opinions that you want to put in there as well. So Lane explains, oh my word, what did I just do now? Right, okay. Lane explains that the presenter should now go back to the drawing board after the pre-interview and then redevelop the game plan, just as I said. Plan for open-ended questions that are going to have follow-up questions just after that. Let me just go here. Okay, so that's 1 to 4, right? Okay, and then we go on air. We all ready, right? Okay, you feel confident, just like guess what? Everything else that you go on air and you're prepared to go and do, right? So you're going to be confident in the interview. You'll be confident in your content. You'll be confident in an activation. You'll be confident to go on there. Welcome the guests when they do come to the studio. Go outside, play some music. I'm saying if you don't have a producer, they will take care of this for you. Go and offer them some coffee or some. If there is one of those situations where you're going to give them food, they're going to be there for a while. They're going to do like a bit of a press release from there. It's, make sure that they are taken care of and they are acknowledged. Also, if they're comfortable, do they need anything? Tell them of the setup within the studio and how this is how it's going to work. I'm going to bring you in just a moment. Just sit there and just wait for me, so that they are also, like I say, at a state where where they have peace of mind, so that they do not come in there nervous or like kind of what is it, highly strung, or whatever it may be, right? Shaky, right? Execute the actual interview. Finally, actually execute it. Entertain first and sell second. Remember, as I said, the whole point of this is to promote a great content piece for your listeners, sure, hand in hand with something that services this particular guest. And again, with every single guest, it's going to be there's going to be a different angle, right? Different context and different ways that we'd have to obviously sit and professionally approach this and say, I'd like to change just a little bit of this, approach this a little differently, take on this a little differently, start this a little differently. And again, do not be afraid to add some value. Bring in like a surprise guest, surprise caller, contributor, whatever it is. Like go and find statements that were made. Like go and look at like their social media feed. Bring that in, right? Surprise your guests and avoid questions that already provide the answer. Please, I mean, if we know the answer, that means that the listeners already know the answers to, and so it is not worth asking. Avoid the yes, no questions, right? Unless they are a springboard to be able to ask open-ended questions. So you need them to actually admit yes or no so that I can go and further ask something else, right? Ask sensitive questions, and that means that you have to build a rapport with this particular guest very, very, very quickly, right? Just like you do with a listener that is going to chat to you on air. That is part of our skill, right? So just make sure that if you're planning for some hard questions, anyway, they're going to know of it, but also don't stick to that rigid structure, as I've said before, right? Okay, and use those question clusters, excuse me. So these can be effective ways of saying, like, look, how, why is that? I don't understand. Like, so then what did you do? Or I can only imagine what your wife, or your husband, or your kids had to say, or so, or if you don't, something surprising. You are the one that sets up something surprising within that particular interview. Like they tell you something that you're like, whoa, I didn't know that. Can you please take the opportunity, take the win, and I'm saying to you, move on with it, right? All right, so that's the one I'm going to do for that one over there. The roundup from there. Let me go to this one, and let's just quickly look at some talk points around the lesson 33, which is the second part of the interviewing. The third part is an actual practical, as we remember, and we have been doing again in class, like on at a second year level. That sounds awful, but I've explained to you already that we delved into it once with a particular practical example, and then we moved on because there's other work to do, right, as well. So just remember that what you learned in class, please do apply in your assignment again. Right. So I think I know over the next couple of weeks, I will be adding on just an extra because we've done one now. We've done together. I know practically we've done it to death, right? I'm saying to build the first question with the call out. We're going to look at, let's say, storytelling. We're going to look at, let's say, I think the different aspects that you have. If I've got it just here. Open. Just give me a second here. Maybe I've got it here. It should be somewhere here. So yeah, that's not right. That's an F1 brief. Give me a second. It pops up here. Think it's gonna work. Looks like it will. Let me just quickly speak in turn, not out of turn, right? On a game production. Right, create a 2-minute introduction on the, is this 2025? Yes, okay, good. Okay, so guess the throwback. I think I'm confusing most of this with the third year stuff. So please apologetic, right? Yeah, Clark, okay. Then your gaming, right? Let's have a look at it. It's the interview. Okay, storytelling a personal narrative. We have done this. We have done this in class, right? Please go look at the 5 rules of storytelling, right? To be able to complete it, and then the event simulation for you. So just as a sidebar, just to kind of focus and repeat this again, you can't, so I've said to you, push, 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 please, for a real, like something real, especially within, let's say, the interview. Don't go interview someone fake, because it's just going to sound awful. And if you do, I'm not going to take the marks off. I just think that it's better that you go and do this properly, because you're going to get the right interaction, the right back and forth, and so on and so forth. Anyway, okay, we're going to look at, I'm going to do a little bit of a practical over the next, let's say, maybe week or so, with the next, let's say, load of second year classes, on, let's say, doing a look, focusing slightly on borderline news, right? And then making sure that we can do an outside broadcast or event simulation over here. Right, this one is not, so it says a local live event, because the third years have to do a crisis, right? Hook describing the scene, specialty twist, And into the kicker. Oh, so it's nice and light. I know I act like I haven't read this before. I forget very easily. So, this is actually something you can actually go and do. That'll be quite nice. Just look at the live event and move on. All right. Anyway, okay. So let's move back to this particular one, right? And let's have a look at some key points for journalists, talk hosts, and music personalities. Interviews are necessary as part of all the information that you gather and you want to present to that audience on any one particular day. A powerful interview can rivet, in other words, return to the audience to their radios. A boring one can make them disappear, revert, not rivet, revert. Remember your guests, whether rock stars, artists, politicians, experts, and specialists, or regular people with stories to tell, may be nervous. Please, this is a big deal, right? Like, if you can't, you have to tell them, please, I beg of you, right? Like, and also, like, you know this beforehand to a certain extent. You test them and say, are you okay with speaking publicly? Is there something that you are fearing? Is there something that you have anxiety about? I need to sort that out now, because if you go on air and you are reading off, let's say, a prep sheet from your laptop, and you're not talking to me, and your mouth is going a bit dry and you're kind of stumbling over the words, it's not. Look, I feel empathetic sympathy for you, but the thing is that you're ruining the product, right? So they really, really have to be sure, and you have to be sure they can do this. Otherwise, you have to find another way of doing this. Again, the pre-recorded interview is always a great backup plan, right? Okay. Anyway, so I'm just going to move down to some more key points here. The purpose is obviously for the interview to open up, as I said, to quite quickly, right? Quite quickly and very organically to what it is that you want to talk about. Sure, they do know through the pre-interview process and the prep that you do send them in advance, because that's their professional way of doing this, right? So that they know they can think, the guests can think of many different things and exact things as well that they'd like to say, during the interview and cover, and know also that they should be answering the questions that are directed to them, and not speak freely, or like kind of like almost like law scope, around them, right? Okay. So you got to make them forget about the microphone. That is, we can just imagine how long it took you, or how long it'll take you to forget about the microphone. So have a little bit of empathy in that, but because you are the professional, you can take them through and say, "You're talking to me. There's nobody else that you have to actually think about," because they think about the hundreds, the thousands, all their family, their friends that are listening to him, their boss, whatever. Hmm. Anyway, but really, what we do is we do like a little bit of a monologue before, because we have to contextualize that guest, right? So an example would be, I'm just going to show you from my side, right? I just want to get, I think it's this one over here. Um, right. Show you an exact example of just a quick interview I'm using, oh yeah, to interview Tom Mitchell, right? About his brand new song "Dying for You." Here we go. Here's enough from the press release, and also what I would then go from here onwards is, close to the show, I'm going to say I want to talk about the song, right? I want to be able to make sure that I want to talk a little bit about his, background, right? Let's have about there, because that's important, right? Let's undo that because I want it to be exact, please. Huh? Okay, no menu. Second, just want to give a proper example. Sorry, man, I'm a bit OCD. Okay, perfect, right? So I would use that, right? And obviously I've got all these handles. This is a very short interview, right? Because it must be about 5 to 7 minutes long. And so we've got only like a four maximum questions that I can actually ask him before playing the song. So in terms of that, this is where the monologue comes in, right? Agreed? Right? Okay. All right. So let's just move that on there. We don't want to be able to contextualize a guest just like we would ideally for anyone who just tuned into the station, but also is a first time listener, but also doesn't know the guest. Make sure there's enough context there, the correct context to be able to say to the listener, listen here, this is a good guest that you're going to love and you're going to be interested in because we put content on just for you, right? Okay. So make sure that you develop your own style using, yes, the great true Larry King, Oprah Winfrey, Piers Morgan to a large extent, right? There are quite an endless amount of really big international stars. I'm saying talk show hosts that you can go and learn something from, right? Each of them have their own technique, though, and that's what I'm saying. Develop your own technique that is robust, very much you, but at the end of the day, don't forget, radio is not just about you, it's about skills that make it good, that you can use and apply to make it good, right? And maintain control. Once you lose control, that's okay. I'm saying that's fine, as long as you retain it or you regain it once again. So the art of interviewing, powerful listening. The more you listen, and sorry, I'm not sorry. I just want to explain why. Once again, I'm moving quite quickly through this because it's content that has been covered in previous lessons. As you can see, 33, 34, we're up to around about 40. I know with the part-timers, it's up to 42, right? But this is important for your F2, right? Okay. So please, the listening is key. That is how you are your presence. So if you listen to someone, it's not you're not listening if you only want to listen to have a response. That makes no sense, right? Then you're just allowing someone to talk just until the point where you want to actually say your say. That's not conversation. That's not interaction. That is also of no interest. I'm saying it's obviously disrespectful at the same time. Excuse me, right? Okay, so, right, okay, so listening is key. The sensitive approach is a skill that you will develop through listening, particularly tips, please be flexible. Like if the interview time has to be changed, we'll do it. If you need to, but please don't let the guest dictate to you what you cannot do on the show. In other words, like them saying here and there and mixing it up and making it really difficult for you. Like for example, I'm only available between 4 and 5, but 4 and 5 you actually have a different something different that cannot be moved like competition, activation, whatever it may be, and tell them, listen, yeah, like you want to make a different plan, or we pre-record, right? That seems to be my answer to everything, right? So, so here are again, these are tips for interviews, and I've gone through that in class. I don't want to go through that again. Just some thoughts for hosts and interviewers. Once again, the recap of forget the long hello, rather go to the introduction because it's a much more effective hook and crumbs that lead into the actual interview, and everyone follows along. Avoid the yes no questions. You know this, yeah, curiosity, right? Please be curious about what is and who it is that you're talking to and for what reason, and ask those dumb questions to be able to formulate a foundation, right? Not everyone knows what certain, let's say, technical aspects or biological aspects or health aspects or whatever it may be. If you don't know 10 to 1 after even doing your research, and you are anyway, like you're an information consumer, right? So you should be a little bit like slightly informed about pretty much everything, right? Mm, that's commercially, I'm saying commercially, I say, so commercially like invested within, or it's integrated within, that's a better word, integrated within any one particular person's life. Ask those questions for clarity at the end of the day. Control the interview, please steer the subject, respect responses, and remember, control yourself. Remember, the worst, I'm saying, let's say picture yourself with the worst type of person in that studio. I'm saying based on what they've done, etc., you're going to have some kind of, whatever it is, bias. You must be able to manage yourself very carefully. I just want to go through some of those questions over here for what we've developed with the third years that I think will help you. And I think I know. Here's the first one, interview with Taryn, Boston Media House Arcadia principal. And it's around how is BMH innovatively growing the product and the student service, right? Or the student experience. Since COVID hit in 2020, there was been a stark decline in one, student registrations and student dropouts, but two, also has placed the brand at risk. Strategically, what has been Boston's top priority to its students? Can you see how we contextualize? We don't want these direct questions all the time, right? We want to contextualize why it is that we are asking that question. So a lot of what you have researched will come into the construct of these questions, right? Blended learning is a great way to run hybrid education. How well has this been working for Boston Media House that is intensively practically based learning? Have you had formal feedback, for example, using a student focus group on how well or not the media campuses have exceeded their expectations and campus experience? What resources are currently available for our students to widen and sharpen their practical skills and development? Where in the industry are our alumni making a mark and shifting it into a new era? In other words, shifting our brand into a new era? These are all great questions, right? Because we want to be able to, this all revolves around what Taryn would know, and Taryn is involved in, but also she's a perfect guest for it, right? But it surrounds um, it's the claim to innovation that BMH has been making quite social. I'm saying socially in terms of like media wise online. So it's a bit of our. I think it's more about our mission statement over the next couple of years, right? But let's get first to the stuff. Let's not skip over what happened over the past couple of years and how we got here, right? Here's one from Kabangi, the head of Boston Broadcast. Let's clear up the understanding of why there is an interview audition process for a station that is actually supposed to be used for any and all student practical experience, something that students have been really like struggling with to understand. Here's some questions. Currently, how is the station made accessible? Not listened by, right? So not for about the listeners, for the Pretoria and the Durban students. Accessibility from other campuses. The radio station is based in Sandton. Okay, let's accept for now that the audition process is a legitimate one. In other words, because there's confusion, right? Those. How does that work? I'm saying to regard those studios, how is there still like a bit of a dilution, a filter, a rejection process when we say that those facilities are there so that all students can learn, right? But the truth of the matter is, like they're trying to build a brand, Boston Broadcast, right? You can't pick and choose. I'm saying pick and allow everyone, right? So let's quickly go back here. Okay. So, what does Boston Broadcast look for in a future volunteer, and what roles are actually made available to apply for? When it comes to making the station known, why is there so little marketing or promotion for the station itself? D. Can you walk us through the station structure? So, its departments, its volunteers, its live shows versus the structure of what's promoted as the podcasting space and the brand of Boston Broadcast. How do they both synchronize? You know, great questions, right? What does the future, i.e., the next 5 years, hold for Boston Broadcast, right? Part-time students working in the media industry. That's the third possible interview we can hold within our shows that are coming up. They can share light on the industry dynamics for or to the full-time students, right? Because it is well known that the media industry in South Africa is extremely small, and so is even more demanding. How have you been moving forward at work and still sticking to your commitment as a student? Someone that has not or does not take on too heavy responsibilities like a dual work and study life won't understand your situation fully. Just how much does it take to get by? How do you do it? C, what does a social life look like to a working student? D, what lessons have you learned the hard way? E, knowing what you do, please debunk exactly all the myths and the expectations around what the opportunities for media grad are in the essay industry. Is there a gender equality? Is there gender equality within African culture in 2025 with the African Gender Equality Research Group? So we're interviewing them because they state that they are on the next or the cutting edge of being able to move the shift of interpretation around this gender inequality, right? Okay, so we're asking them what traditional African sects still hinder the liberal goal of female equality, and in what ways is this being done? You're holding workshops that propagate African female empowerment, so cultural feminism. These are aimed at changing the current norms around gender inequality. Why do you believe this will actually make a difference? Who exactly should be and is listening to what you have to say? Is there any hard research that has resulted in drawing the correct focus and action towards gender based justice throughout Africa? Which countries are getting it right? What are they doing exactly? Is the sisterhood growing in the sense that you're finding previously silent voices being collectively heard? Number five, an interview with Salient Cycles, who are a student community focused cycle rental service manager Shireen Munde, let me say this Mundedi, right? Mundedi, on how the cycling world can make a positive impact on your mental well-being. Let's start with your start. How and why did you begin Salient Cycles? With what end in mind? B. So, anyone out there looking to freshen up their mental state comes in, rents a bike, and then follows a preset route. How does this actually help with the mental health, right? A customer has a few options to choose from, including an arts and crafts activity where you pay to paint a cycle. So, do you recommend certain services to customers based on, for example, and you let them finish? Who is your target client? So, is it students or does it include a certain psychographic? Are there any plans of extending services at Salient Cycles? Right. So what I'm doing is, sorry, I just want to save this as so I can just get rid of that. Whew, let's do this here quickly. I just want to make sure it's changed to H radio, radio 223 and 323 par snap X's content X's. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that along with this video, right? Then we're going to share that there. I'm going to share it with Grant in just a moment. And I hope that this does actually help you because now it's on record, right? Right, with your assignment ahead. Cheers, bye.